Welcome to She Said Homestead, the podcast that explores homesteading from a range of perspectives. We're Sage and Mickayla, two homesteaders, each with unique experiences, properties, and future goals for our homesteads. We're discussing various homesteading topics, sharing our personal experiences as women working full-time who are managing homesteads as well, and shining a light on the stories of other inspiring homesteaders.
Before we dive in, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoy our podcast, please consider leaving a review. It really helps us grow and share these homesteading stories with even more people.
Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. My name is Sage from Terra Nova Acres.
And I'm Mickayla from Calico Cow Acres, and we both have homesteads in Western North Carolina.
Today's episode topic is going to be all about why Mickayla and I homestead. But before we get into that, tell me a little bit about your week.
I had a pretty wild week. Just there was a lot going on, but it wasn't really homestead related. My dad kind of semi-surprise visited. He texted me the day before, and he's like, hey, which hotel should I stay at? And I was like, when? And he goes, tomorrow I'm gonna leave. And I'm like, okay. So I know what I'm doing this weekend. We actually had a good time though. We went up to Lake James and kind of drove around the lake, checked out the beach there, which I didn't know that there was a beach there. Actually didn't even know Lake James was there, honestly. We are gonna go there and sit on the beach because it's been 2 years since I've gone swimming. So I'm excited for that in the future. And then we took him to an orchard and we picked blueberries and blackberries, and they had like hot apple cider donuts and this, I don't know, this whole deal there. It's definitely a touristy location, but it was actually pretty fun. Really pretty in the mountains. And I got a donut and coffee scented candle, and now I'm ready for fall. I've been kind of in like a fall cozy mood this week, I'm not gonna lie, because of that. But I've also been snacking on fresh blueberries and blackberries. I stuffed my face. I was almost like, they almost had to roll me out of there. I was so full of blackberries.
Neither one of us is ready for it to be fall. Don't you dare wish that on us yet. We are, at least when we're recording this, it's mid-July. And if we were to fast forward to fall, we would both lose our minds. Things that we would have to keep up with. So don't say that.
I think that part of it is because we actually have gotten rain a couple days, finally. And so like the gloomy weather, the like coffee, candle, and like going to the apple orchard and having donuts has me like in the cozy mood. And we started watching Gilmore Girls again. We've made ourselves wait before we started it again. It's been like months now since I've watched it. So that just automatically puts me in the cozy mood. So yeah, we've gotten some rain finally the last 2 days, which is really, really nice because my garden, my garden's doing all right for the most part with the sprinkler, but I am so sick of moving the sprinkler. I ordered some more camera equipment. I ordered a new lens that's a wide angle lens, so I will have a lot easier time filming videos now, I think, because my big head's not going to be taking up the entire frame. And it also means I can do higher quality videos, because when you switch to 4K, probably nobody cares about this, but when you switch to 4K, it like zooms in, it changes the frame. And whenever I was trying to do that, it would just be my face, no matter how far away my arm was. So I'm excited to have a little bit better situation for that. And I just ordered a new microphone as well. So I am on a roll with that kind of stuff. I actually just have to put it in motion now. And then the thing that I'm most excited about, and you're going to hate me for saying this too, is I officially figured out everything I'm planting for the fall garden. I scheduled out when I'm going to start my seeds. I figured out my little garden map where everything's going to go, and like succession planting with the summer stuff. I figured out my system for where the chickens are going to get let into the garden. I have it all figured out. We're going to test out some cover cropping, which I'm excited to try. And I have all of the seeds that I need. I ordered the 3 packets of seeds that I didn't have. And I just have to order a little bit of garlic seed. And then like the fall garden stuff is already rolling. It's on its way. I just have to actually clean my seed starting stuff up a little bit and get it going. I think, what day is it right now? July 16th. It's probably going to be August 1st-ish when I start my seeds, I think. That's everything that I did this week. It's kind of a lot, but
Yeah, normally it stresses me out when people start talking about fall seeds, but I've had that prompted in other conversations. And so I started doing it myself. Also, there was a internet technician here, and I was like, what do I do while this person's in my house? I don't know. I guess I'll go through my seeds. So I did that too. I pulled out all of my seeds for my fall garden. I don't think I need to order anything extra, but I will inevitably find something. But yeah, I'm staring at the calendar going, okay, if I'm serious about it, I should really start that in the next week and a half at this point. Most of them anyway, which is I just got to the point where I'm not starting anything else. And I feel like that's a common gardener thing. You hit the fall garden and you're like, do I have enough energy to do this, or should I just let it go? I don't know.
I'm actually excited for it. And I think it's because this is the first time, this year more than last year, I actually feel organized a little bit about it. We don't have a huge building project going on right now. And we not only mapped out the fall garden, we actually kind of sat down last night and mapped out the next, the rest of the year, I guess the next 6 months of the big projects we want to try and accomplish to keep things rolling, keep content coming out, and actually make things interesting. Because I feel like with the heat, we've kind of taken a break from vlogging because it's just uncomfortable to be outside, and we don't feel like filming anything because we don't even want to be outside doing stuff. I'm excited about the fall stuff because I think it's because I'm ready to be done with the 105-degree weather. It's been really brutal on a lot of things, including the garden and myself. I'm ready to harvest things and preserve, but I'm also ready to move on to the next season where I know that it will be a little bit more tolerable weather-wise.
Right. Yeah, I'm also finding myself kind of on the cusp of this is the season of I walk into the garden and something has grown what seems like 3 feet overnight, but I haven't quite had that because it's been so dry. So for me, I haven't gotten rain in at least a week and a half. I want to say 2 weeks at this point, but now thankfully the forecast, it looks like there's several storms. So hopefully a handful of those will actually happen. So this is the time where I did my first basil harvest where I was pinching off the tops of everything that was trying to go to seed. So I'll probably make basil with that. I've collected my wine berries, which I need to make a batch of jam with that. And the first handful of tomatoes have started to ripen. They're all paste tomatoes. Nothing fun like a really satisfying brandy wine or like a big slicer to make a tomato sandwich out of. But it's the start of it. And so, that I'm noticing that new stage is setting in, which makes sense. It hasn't been all that long since I finished planting things. My succession seeds have popped up, so those need to go in the ground. It's changing, and I want to appreciate it while it's here. I'm so busy trying to keep up with it, but also once summer's over, it's over. You don't get that redo. So I'm trying to embrace it while it's here.
Do you feel like the garden's a little bit behind this year? It's taking off slower because of the heat? Because mine feels like it's not where it was last year remotely. I feel like I'm in June still with the growth.
I think that's really hard for me to gauge because I had that crazy hailstorm at the beginning of the year. So I had to do things like replant my tomatoes, and my cucumbers never really came back from that. So I'm sure the current hot, dry weather that, both of us have been having is having some effect. And maybe I do actually see that a little bit with my squashes, but just because I've had other issues at the start of the season, it's hard to tell, what effect or what consequences from which source exactly. But something fun is that I have actually started pulling in a decent amount of flowers. So things have been, starting to bloom here and there. But, for example, with zinnias, you kind of have to let them get a little bit older so that they'll actually last in a vase. And so I've been staring at these things, wanting to harvest them, but wanting them to get old enough so that they'll actually have decent vase life. And also wanting to get a video of them before I just pull all of them out. So that's cool. I'm, harvested a couple buckets worth of flowers today, which I haven't done that since September last year, probably. So that's a really good feeling. And then my bed full of dahlias have shot up, and they, for the most part, have buds on like half of them, probably. So those are my favorite flower, and I'm so excited for that. Like, it's happening, and although I am enjoying this bit of respite between planting and preserving, I'm also like, let's do it. I'm ready for it. Is there any update with the snake encounters that you talked about last time?
Yeah, I don't know the extent of the story that I told last time. So yeah, I think I ended last time with, we went out the second night to try and make sure it wasn't like, to get rid of it, and Taylor was going to put it in a burlap bag and like take it to the other side of the property, and just like, hopefully, actually he was like, there's a pathway through our fence to the neighbor's fence. He's like, I was just gonna like gently set it on the other side. I was like, yeah, because
your
a foot's gonna make a
problem
difference.
now.
Yeah. So we went to go try and find it, and we cleaned out all of their bedding and stuff, and it wasn't in there, and we just were hoping it was gone. 2 nights ago, we came back. We've been diligently picking the eggs up in the morning, making sure they're not hanging out there. We blocked off its little cubby hole, and we went out there to put the ducks away 2 nights ago. It was already really late, and we were really tired. I had worked on Sunday, and I did all of our meal prep and filmed a YouTube video and everything still. And I was exhausted. It was like almost midnight already. We get out there, go to put the ducks away, and there's the snake. And they're just like running around, absolute chaos, quacking at the snake because they're like, he's in our bed. We can't go in there, Mom and Dad. Like, why are you trying to tell us to go to bed? And then Taylor's wearing flip-flops. And he's got the garden rake, and he's trying to like nudge this thing away, and he's like holding the door to the duck coop closed with his flip-flop foot, and it's like standing up, and it's like 6 inches away from his foot. I'm like, he's gonna bite you. Like, what are you doing? Are you crazy? Go put boots on. I'm not getting near this thing, so this is a you thing. Like, I'm holding the flashlight. And finally,
Moral support.
Yeah, I held the light. We finally got it to like go around, and it was trying to find its way out, and we have chicken wire between the duck and chicken runs, and he kept trying to go through the chicken wire, but he could get like a foot through, and then he was too chunky, so he had to keep backing out after he realized he was too fat to go through it. He finally found his way out, and he like wiggled over. We thought he went under the IBC tote, and then we closed them up and everything, went to go collect the eggs for the chickens, and he's like, we have to stand on the tree stump to do that, to like open the doors, and he's just like hanging out, like standing up right there. And I was like, I literally jumped. I was like, heart attack. Got the eggs, and he slithered into a wood pile, and I haven't seen him since then. But, and I can say this because this episode comes out after Taylor is already going to be home. He's leaving next week for 2 weeks, so I will be alone. And if that happens while I am home alone, I am going to scoop up all my ducks, and they're just going to come sleep inside with me, because there's no way that I'm dealing with the snake by myself.
Is it a black rat snake, or what kind of snake is it?
It's probably like a 6-foot long rat snake. It's really big.
Oh.
It's thick.
I will say, at least in my experience with them and their reputation, they're not super mean. They tend to be pretty docile. All of the black rat snakes that I've come across here have been pretty chill. I mean, even when I stepped on one last week, it was pretty chill. Not to say that I'm gonna just like go grab one, right? But as far as snakes go, they're probably the Labrador. It's the best one to run into.
I don't disagree with you. And Taylor also tried to tell me that to make me feel better, but it doesn't. It really doesn't.
Still a snake.
Yep, still a snake. Still not a fan.
All right, on the topic of dealing with snakes, and being busy keeping up with seed starting schedules and everything else, let's talk about why we put ourselves through this, because clearly there have to be reasons if we're willing to endure all of these things.
I feel like I have mentioned this probably 100 times at this point, but I don't really have one specific reason or thing that led me to homesteading. I feel like it's a really big culmination of things. And the longer that I've been homesteading, the more things I realize have led me to this. The more pieces of the puzzle kind of come together. Is that similar for you?
It's very similar for me. Yeah. I mean, it's not one reason at all. It's definitely a combination of things. And now that I've been doing it for, I'll round up and say a few years, something that I find interesting is that it's kind of shifting, and things still stay relevant for me. They're not, completely off the board anymore, but they're just not as important. But then I'm finding other reasons that are becoming more important to me the longer I'm doing it, and as, society evolves.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think it has been, and I think it will continue to be sort of an evolution where like your priorities and outlook and just knowledge of life changes. So the reasons that you're doing this or, not doing this, whatever the future brings, that's going to continue to evolve as well.
If you were to pick one main reason that you homestead, or an overarching reason that you homestead, what would it be?
That is a really tough one because I do feel like they all really contribute, all of my reasons. But I think the one that drives me the most and continues to motivate me is being able to have like super unique experiences that I feel like the general public doesn't necessarily get to have on a daily basis. The possibility of having those unique experiences is what really challenges me on a daily basis. It gives me something to look forward to and to work towards. I think that's probably my main continuous reason right now, anyway. What would your answer be to that?
For me, it has definitely been, at least to this point, getting good with my mental health, like building a life that feels good to my nervous system. I don't think I've ever fully had that. I think for the first few decades of my life, I was trying to live life fitting into a box that I just didn't fit in. And instead of saying, hey, maybe I don't fit in this box, I was just trying to like cram myself into it further and further. And something that's really cool that homesteading has allowed me to do is give me just almost an irresponsible amount of freedom to do whatever I want. And I've talked about that before, but it's cool because it allows you, or it has allowed me, to get to know myself and my preferences in a way that I've never allowed myself to.
I feel like homesteading kind of comes with its own box. And that's another reason that I not only do the homesteading thing, but also share how I'm doing the homesteading thing on social media. Because I feel like it's very important to show that there are differences, there is diversity in this, and you can kind of do it however you want to do it and do it in whatever way works for you. The motivation factor of showing people that you can do this however you freaking want to is another reason that I do it in general.
Right. I mean, neither one of us have children. That may or may not change for you. I don't know. I don't want to put words in your mouth. But, I don't even have a partner. I'm just doing it by myself, doing it on one income, and doing it with land that probably would not be considered agricultural land or decent pasture just because of the slope of it. But it's what I can do, so I'm doing it.
I mean, if you think about it legally in North Carolina, neither of us technically meet homestead criteria.
Yeah, what is it? You need like 10 acres and you need to make at least $55,000 from your land or something crazy like that. Yeah. Definitely not it.
Or you have to be retired or like 65 or something. Definitely don't meet any of that criteria. So another thing that I feel like we've talked about here before is that I kind of just grew up in the woods, and it's really taken me a long time to realize that that was such a big part of my life as a child. Like, I don't know that I recognized how much of an impact that had on me until I was in my mid 20s. And like, now that we talk about this kind of stuff consistently, I realize it. I grew up reading like Little House on the Prairie and all that kind of stuff, and watching that a show on TV. That's a little problematic now, so I try not to say that we're doing Little House on the Prairie things. But so I literally spent my days as a child like building little log cabins in the woods and laying on a blanket and bringing like little picnic baskets out to the stream in our forest and reading and like swimming in the creek and climbing the hills out there and stuff. And I realize now that that's because it activated my parasympathetic nervous system situation. It calmed me down. It really just like felt right to me as a child. And I had friends doing that with me. My cousins had animals that we took care of. My best friends, some of them had horses that we would ride. And I always remember being so jealous of them and wanting those farm animals. I always wanted to live on a farm, even though I didn't really realize what that meant at that point. So I think that there was always that kind of inkling of wanting this in my brain. It always felt right. And like I said, the pieces have kind of just fallen together at this point. So I realize now that like being around the animals and being in nature, like I said, the parasympathetic nervous system, where it's actually like physically calming you down in multiple ways, that's what was affecting me. And that's another reason that I do it today, is because that's part of my mental health too.
Absolutely. At least for me, there are so many aspects of homesteading that help me regulate. And it doesn't come from one aspect. It's really helpful for me to work with my hands. There's a decent amount of research that shows working with your hands releases some happy chemicals in your brain. And we can all use a little bit more of that, right? Even just generally spending time outdoors, even if I'm not physically doing anything, because sometimes, yeah, I want to do things, but sometimes I just want to relax and hang out. And even just being outside, assuming it's not super hot or super cold, which sometimes it is also really enjoyable, really helpful. I can't really think of a time that I regretted spending time outside to relax. It's always refreshing to me. It's always recharging to me. And then there's also things just as elemental as just touching dirt. Just touching dirt and exposing yourself to the soil microbes and all of these things that, at the end of the day, we're animals and we evolved in nature and we are part of it. And so it's not surprising that we're starting to find all of these links that there are things like soil microbes that when we touch, it has a positive effect on us. And so those are at least the reasons that I'm aware of. I'm sure there's so many more that are subconscious or that, science just hasn't identified yet, but it helps in a big way.
That is especially important, I think, too, at the end of the day, when you've been on a computer for 8+ hours straight.
Absolutely. Yeah. My brain starts going like a little bit definitely crazy sitting down and focusing in one spot for so long. It's not what I'm built for. We're both pretty introverted people. Socialization and going out and doing things out in the world is not really our spiel, but also it's not like either one of us would be content hanging around the house doing nothing. So the cool thing about homesteading cool sometimes, overwhelming other times, is that there's always something to do. So I am someone who gets bored easily, but I don't think I've been bored once since I started doing this, because, even in winter, there's still things to plan for. There's still things that I can do inside. There's still a million things to do, even when you can't, go play with the animals or go grow a garden. What about the food quality aspect of it? Does that come into play for you at all?
So that is one for me that has come up more recently than a lot of my other reasons. And there's a reason for that. It's not necessarily something I was thinking about when I started to get into this, because I was looking at this as an opportunity for improving my mental health, for improving my skin issues that I have with like rashes and eczema and stuff. That was another big reason. I still struggle with the quality food aspect, because I'm at a point where I recognize that I want to eat higher quality food, but I have a really big mental block of buying more expensive food. And that is something that's super hard for me. I don't know, it might sound silly to some people, but I just, like, the way that I grew up, like, we always bought off-brand, we always had the cheapest stuff, and we always just had, like, pre-made meals like Hamburger Helper and Kraft. Like, I've talked about that so many times. And I still get to the point where, like, I get overwhelmed with everything and I fall back onto those things, and I want to get to a point where I have enough like homemade fast food in my pantry where I don't have to do that. So it's something that I definitely struggle with, but it is a goal now. For me, more than the quality, I guess, to start, it was the novelty, I would say, of being able to grow interesting things that aren't available in the stores, and just like the different varieties and stuff, and just like learning how to cook with new stuff and things that I'm not used to, and things that are in season versus not in season. All of that kind of plays more into it for me than the quality, I would say, specifically. So this weekend when my dad was here, I had this moment of realization where I talk about food a lot. Like, it's just something that I really love. Like, I'm constantly cooking homemade food. I'm constantly preserving and thinking about food, like what new recipes I could try, or what varieties are going to be coming out of the garden, or what things I want to grow next year. I'm constantly thinking about food. And so when my dad was here, I'm talking about this stuff, and he's like, countering everything I say that I'm making homemade. He's like, oh, well, an easier way that I do that is I get this and this from Sam's Club, and I just throw them together, and then it's made, and then I have my meals for a few days. And I'm like, okay, but that is super processed, and that is super processed, and you're putting them together, and that is not healthy. Like, I recognize that now. And then I took him to the farmer's market, and he saw there was sweet corn there. He wasn't really super interested in anything else. He does not eat vegetables. Like, he's not a vegetable eater. He saw sweet corn there, and that's something that he does like to eat. And he pulls me aside and he goes, that doesn't look like it's very good quality. Why are they selling it here? It's super pale. And I was like, oh, that is just a different variety of sweet corn. It's called Silver Queen, probably. That's like the popular one around here. It's just white. It tastes the same. And he was really skeptical. So he got some to try it, because he was like, I'm going to prove you wrong, that this is actually not like good corn. Like, I'm going to try it and see if it actually is sweet, because I've never seen it that pale before. And this is not me trying to diss my dad. He's just not, like, he grew up super poor. And with a huge family. So he has dealt with a lot of struggle, cheap food situations in his life, and I understand. But it was just really interesting to me that, like, I know this and I can recognize these things now.
How did he like the corn? I'm invested.
He hasn't texted me, so I don't know. I need to text him after this. Let me text him right now so I don't forget. How was your corn?
Cliffhanger, man. Even me in the last few years, I've gardened for several years, but it was never this scale. I was always picking and choosing, my handful of things that I could fit. And, even just in the last few years, I've been like, zucchini can be round? Like what? That was mind blowing to me. So I'm not above that at all either.
The quality of food was not necessarily my driving factor for this lifestyle, but I'm curious if it was more of a factor for you.
Food has always been like a really heavy interest factor in my life. It's something that I see as like a very nurturing thing, both, having been done for me. Like I grew up with my mom cooking most of the meals. Breakfast was cereal, that's not a big deal, and lunch was leftovers, but like dinner was a thing. And for most of the time we sat down at the table and my mom put down a meal that was made from scratch. And at the time, that's something that I took for granted because now I have to cook all of my food. It's a lot of work to feed one human, much less a whole family. But different subject. And so food, as far as I received it, was like one of the main ways that I felt loved and cared for and nurtured. And so I think that's why I've carried that through life as, something that I am emotionally attached to, that I enjoy participating in. And before I started homesteading, I was very, very intentional about eating healthy. I would sit down and meal prep and at some points even, calculating my macros, and I've done things like carb cycling. And so like food has always been a consideration in my life. But coming to homesteading and having that be such an integral part of my life and much more intimately involved with my food sources is never something that I saw myself getting into, but now that I'm into it, I can't see myself living any other way. I'm not conspiratorial with it by any means, but just knowing where your food comes from is so huge. And it's not to put any distrust in the people who are farmers and who grow our food. We need them so much. They are so, 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 so crucial to our society. But either developing a relationship with the person you get your food from, going to a farmer's market, doing those things, or being able to grow whatever you can yourself, that makes such a difference, not only with vegetables, but also with meat. I don't know if I've talked about this before, actually, but I spent a long time in high school, in college, and I think briefly after, vegetarian, and even for a few years of that, vegan, where I was not eating any meat, I was not eating any animal products. And that was mostly motivated by, I don't know of an ethical way, or something that I would call ethical, to get meat. Like, I, at the time, was, in high school and college, I was absolutely not in a place to start a homestead. And so I wasn't able to take that into my hands and do anything about it. I was, my access to it was restricted to what is available at the grocery store. I don't even know if farmers markets were as much of a part of our society as they are nowadays. I feel like now they're so much more commonplace, which I'm grateful for. But it wasn't all that common back then to have even multiple markets in the same city, even if it's a major city. So the access to it was just different. It was kind of coming onto the forefront of the, public consciousness with a bunch of documentaries that came out. And so for a while, I just didn't eat meat. And honestly, at that point in my life, it didn't feel like I was restricting myself from anything. I didn't used to demand a lot of my body. I wasn't super physically active until later. And then that's when I started reintegrating those things, just because I changed what I was asking of my body. And so it felt intuitive to me to change what I was giving my body. And when I decided to add that back, it was not because I magically found ethical meat. It was kind of like, well, what else do I do? So to be able to be in a place where now I have land and I have a little bit of discretionary budget to have chickens and to order a batch of meat birds and to be able to go to a local place to get the feed to feed them, where I know the farm is in the southeast. It's as local as I can manage. They can grow up in my pasture. They can have their last day here, their one bad day here, and then they're stored in my freezer until I make a meal out of them. That is such a big deal, and I don't have the right words to capture that.
Something that you said, it just gave me like a full realization that I didn't know that was a thing before for myself. But what you said about you weren't demanding a lot from your body until you kind of moved to the homestead, and then you kind of changed how you were eating because of that.
Yeah, I started adding meat back after I graduated college. I started introducing, a different exercise routine. Weightlifting is also a way that I keep myself sane outside of homesteading, which if you're lifting weights, you got to feed your body what it needs.
So what I took from that was the same thing happened for me, but it was when we moved to our homestead. I was demanding like a significant amount more from my body. And then I was like, okay, I feel like I need to start eating meat again. And I didn't realize that until you just said that. Like, okay, maybe that makes sense, because it was only like 3 months later after moving here and like doing all of the things all at one time and having no sleep and everything that I was like, okay, my body needs more. So that was a fun realization that I just had, a little epiphany light bulb moment.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for intuitive eating. I have the same body, and I was perfectly happy being vegetarian, and I was perfectly happy being vegan, and I'm perfectly happy not being those things now. And it's so personal, and I certainly don't want to make anyone feel like vegetarianism or veganism is something to be solved. If you are plant-based, more power to that.
I was going to ask you if you have kind of taken over that role of like nurturing and feeding like your family members now that your mom isn't here to do that, like for holidays and stuff.
No, I don't think I have. My brother also really enjoys cooking, and so it's not that I am just now in that role. I think when the family does get together, I think that it's something my brother and I, and also my sister-in-law, we all enjoy coming together and making that. And I don't think any one person could totally take over her role. She did it in a way that could never be replaced.
It's just like a bonding experience now, a different bonding experience now. That makes sense. Not necessarily with like my immediate family, like my parents and stuff, but with my grandparents. My grandma was like is a super good cook, and she loves serving food for everybody. And my great grandma and like all of my family on that side especially was like that. And I feel like this lifestyle makes me feel connected to that, even though I didn't really get to experience it firsthand most of the time. I got to experience it at holidays and stuff. So I feel like with that, I feel connected to like my ancestors and just like the past, you know? And I'm just a super nostalgic person in general, but I feel like I never really had a strong connection to any sort of hobby like that growing up. I was super passive as a kid, where I was never gung-ho about like a sport. I played all of the sports. I did all of the activities. I was never I'm not even kidding. I really did. I was never like so passionate about one thing that I was like, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. Even going into college, I looked through the list backwards and picked architecture because it was the last thing and nothing else sounded good. I'm not joking. And so yeah, I never had like a super big passion other than being very sensitive, very nostalgic, and I feel like homesteading and trying to live with nature, not necessarily saying I'm perfect at this, but it really just makes me feel connected to being a human in general. And I would say normal human, but I feel like most normal people don't do this. So it just makes me feel like what a human it makes me feel connected to what a human should be doing, if that makes any sense.
That's really cool. I honestly don't fully know how to follow that up because that was really awesome. And I don't know what being a normal human feels like. I don't know how qualified I am to speak on that topic, but for me, I have a really interesting and sometimes conflicting need for both routine and novelty. So if I don't have any semblance of a routine, I struggle getting very basic things done. But also, if my days look too similar, if there's not enough newness and excitement, then I get bored and also struggle getting basic stuff done. So that's a really tough line to walk, and homesteading helps a lot with that because the chickens need to get fed every morning. The sheep need to get moved every week. The chickens need to get moved twice a week. Like there are things that need to happen every day that keep me moving because I have to do them. So there's an element of routine there, but also my days are never the same. And so that keeps me balanced in a way that I'm honestly not sure that anything else probably could do as well as homesteading does.
Do you think that having all of the responsibilities of the animals that have to be done contributes to your mental health, even though it's something that technically is putting stress on you? Or do you think that it stresses you out?
As with anything else, there are times that it is stressful. Sure. It's never perfectly even, it's never perfectly balanced. It's never the same, response in my head because there's 1.5 million other things happening in my life outside of the homestead that, the combination is always different. So it depends on what else is going on in my life, but at the end of the day, once I can take time and space away and get better perspective on the situation, I'm always glad that I have that to keep me moving. Part of that is because I can tend to be a very all or nothing person. So the all side of that would be get 99% of my to-do list done, which I have a long to-do list. That's impressive. Run all the errands, do all the chores, preserve a bunch of stuff, mulch a bunch of things in the garden, do all of these little tiny things that accumulate that take so much time. But then my nothing days look like I just want to rot on the couch and doom scroll. And when I know that the chickens have to get fed, when I know that things have to happen, it pulls me away from that. And once I'm up and moving, then it's a lot easier to exist somewhere in the in-between, to exist in, I won't call it fully moderation, but something close to moderation.
I feel the same way. I was curious if that was going to be your answer because it definitely is a literal pick me up. Like I have to get up and do things on the days where I'm like, I just want to lay here and watch Gilmore Girls and do absolutely nothing, interact with absolutely no one, and be a little hermit.
Yeah, I think both of us are motivated by something new and exciting, but also by like urgency. If it doesn't have to get done, probably not going to get done.
I will say specifically it's urgency for things other than myself. If I think something's urgent, I will put it off. If something else is relying on me or someone else is relying on me for something, I will make sure it happens. Something else, I would say, these are a couple like random, they don't really fit into a category here. It has really taught me patience learning to work with the seasons and eat seasonally and just going with the flow of like the chaos of the year because it is always something unexpected is right around the corner. I've learned to be a lot more patient, even though I'm still not super patient. I'm working on that. It's really, I don't know the right word. It makes me feel good, I guess, that I have kind of been able to stick with one, and I'm saying one with quotation marks around that, hobby for once, because I am a serial hobby hopper, and homesteading wraps a million things into one hobby, and I can just call it homesteading and pretend that it's just one hobby.
Do you ever laugh at people when they ask you if you have hobbies other than homesteading?
Nobody asks me that. I think they know the answer.
I get that question all the time, and I'm like, hobbies other than homesteading. Homesteading is 1,000 hobbies. What do you mean?
Who asks you this? I don't interact with that many people.
I have a lot of small talk on dating apps. It's dumb conversations.
Oh yeah, I forgot about this.
Forgot how single I am.
I suppose you could put it that way.
Something that's changed for me from, when I started this to now, at first I was homesteading because it was this new exciting thing. It was this new exciting hobby that I could sink my teeth into and, do all of the things that are very satisfying to me, like go down research rabbit holes and do all this stuff. But now that, I'm in my third season, so there's an element of like, okay, I kind of got this, even though there's always going to be new problems to troubleshoot, new things going on. But comparing my knowledge base and knowing my property now to when I started is drastically different situation. So it's not so much that I am homesteading because it's this new, exciting, shiny thing anymore. And that was always going to wane. But something that I didn't see coming is honestly, especially in the last, I'll call it 6 months or so, I have become more and more aware of where I do spend my money when I do spend it. So if I'm going to go pick up chicken feed, if I'm going to go pick up hay or straw, I don't want to give that to a big box store if I don't have to. Sometimes I don't have an option for convenience or time limitations or access or whatever. But if I can buy my winter supply of hay from the guy who lives on the next road and keep that in the community, I'm going to do that. If I can drive 20 minutes to the local feed store to get organic feed that's from the Southeast instead of supporting a big box store, I'm going to do that. And the more that I'm here and the better that I get at growing and preserving my food, and the more, tools that I accumulate that hopefully I'm not going to have to buy again, the more self-sufficient I get in certain aspects, which we've talked about that before. Self-sufficiency is kind of a rough word for that, but we'll go with it for this explanation at least. I am becoming pickier and choosier about who I'm essentially, like you vote with your dollar. I'm becoming choosier about who I'm voting to support, who I think deserves my money based on how they treat their employees, based on what impact they have, on society. I don't want to give a company who treats its employees terribly. I don't want to give them my money. And I'm in a privileged place actually now finally that I have a level of freedom to choose that, where, when I was living in the city, I didn't have that choice. And so I'm becoming more aware of those sorts of things in the privilege that I have as a homesteader, honestly.
I think that the fact that you're able to do that and that you're willing to do that is important, and it's more important for the fact that there are still a lot of people who don't have the ability to make that decision and like be picky, be choosy. I've definitely seen that in myself, the same shift more and more. That's something that I still struggle with. Same with the like expensive or more like high quality food. I still have the same issue with general items just because of like the mentality I was raised with. But I'm slowly seeing that shift. And I do think it's from recognizing that as time goes on, I'm going to have to buy less tools and input less investment because I've already put that in for like buying things that I need for the homestead. And I can direct that money to higher quality things in the future or local things. Like we finally shifted to buying New Country Organics from our local feed dealer. And we have like a good relationship with them now. I like to catch up with them, and it's just neat to see that kind of grow. I still am not 100% there, and I think it's definitely like a long process, but I see that shift for sure.
Yeah, and to be clear, I'm not 100% there either. I don't want to present myself as this, perfectly choosy, ethical person. Like, there are times that I still go into stores that I won't name, because that's what I have available to me at the moment, and it sucks. It puts me in a bad mood. But if I'm able to do that less and less, I'm happy with progress, not perfection.
Yeah. And I think that like, especially for me, where I kind of have a little bit of a platform with like Instagram and stuff, I can put these thoughts out there, and I have enough people in this area or in our region who see that, and they're like, hey, I went on a rant, a little bit of a rant about food a few months ago, probably maybe at the beginning of this year, about like why it was like a question box. Somebody asked me why I stopped being vegetarian and starting eating meat again, and there was like a whole boatload of reasons. There really are. One of the things I was discussing was that I still kind of feel guilty sometimes when I am getting just like normal grocery store meat or meat from the salvage store because it's super affordable, and then I'm saving it, like I'm preserving it in some way and like saving it in bulk for later. And I do still feel that guilt, but then like I'll have somebody message me like to that message, to that story. Meg messaged me, and she was like, hey, you might be doing the homestead thing, but you're still only a year into this, so don't feel bad about that. Like, you're still in this process and you're doing great. Don't feel bad about like being in the process and not being like to the point where you're 100% there. Like, you shouldn't feel bad about that because you're recognizing like you want to change things and you're working towards it. You're not just recognizing it. And then like offering to help or offering to trade their homegrown high quality meat with me, like that kind of stuff. And I think that like building community around that and supporting local people, like you said, like supporting the person who sells hay down your road, that builds community, and that's a huge deal.
That's another motivation that I didn't necessarily start out with in homesteading, but is becoming more important and more prevalent to me. I have always been, I will call it, a hyper independent person, where I was like, I can do anything I need myself. What are you talking about? I don't need anybody, which is just straight up not true. And it took a few or several different humbling experiences in figuring out what it really looks like to genuinely try to grow even just like half of your food by yourself. That is so much effort, and it can be done. And if you're invested in it, great. There's no reason you can't or shouldn't do it. But the importance of community when you are in the thick of summer and you're exhausted from maintaining your vegetable garden and taking care of your animals, it becomes so valuable to you when you can do things like trade something you have an excess of in your garden that maybe somebody else doesn't. And you can fill in gaps for each other. And that's where the strength of a community comes in. That's where the resilience of a community comes in. And honestly, that should be a strength of humanity, not viewed as a weakness.
I also feel like it's important to note that if you don't have homesteading skills to trade with somebody and you're looking to do that situation where you're like trying to build community but you don't necessarily know much about what you're doing with homesteading yet, you know, offer to help somebody with chores or farm sit for them or something. I don't really have anything to offer in return. I thought I didn't really have anything to offer in return for, like, I say local, but it's literally like 3 houses down raised meat. And then I realized I have a whole bunch of computer skills where I know how to do like architectural drawings, and they just so happen to be building an addition on their house. And so I traded drawing that out for them and showing them like what it's going to look like for some meat. And that just, like, you know, that took me a day to do, not even. And now I have a lot of meat in return, and that was a huge benefit to both of us. You have to kind of think out of the box for that kind of stuff, but it's definitely a possibility. And I think that everybody has a skill, or they can learn a skill, or, you know, even if you don't think you have a skill, it doesn't hurt to ask for somebody to show you how to do something so you can learn a skill. And I know that can be something that's tough for some people. I actually want to say that one of my priorities, one of my main reasons, I guess, for getting into homesteading and continuing to homestead is building community. And honestly, that's a really hard thing for me to say, which probably sounds silly, but I am such a loner in the sense of I like to socialize, but I can socialize for a very small amount of time, and then I need to recharge for a very long amount of time on my own and just not be around people, because I just have my social battery drains really quickly. So when it comes to homesteading, I actually really love that I have been able to build a little bit of a community around this, and it's continuing to grow, and those relationships are continuing to grow because of the simple fact that we have something to talk about. It's not like an awkward exchange where I'm forcing myself to communicate with people most of the time, because I have something that I am really excited about and they're really excited about, and we can actually like converse and grow a relationship. And I think that's really interesting. So something we've talked about previously just a little bit, and a question I want to ask you is, do you think that you are doing this partially because it's not what everyone else is doing?
I have a reputation of being rebellious for the sake of being rebellious, or going against the grain just for the sake of it. And the more that I think about that, the more that I wonder if that's because that those statements are true, or if that's because I just value drastically different things than, I'll say, an average or normal person would. And so going against the grain or doing things differently is just a natural byproduct of that. And honestly, I don't know. I don't know if I will ever be able to separate those things, but I've just been weird my whole life. And so whether that is now I just need to be weird because who am I if I'm not weird, or if I just am, I don't know, but either way I'm weird and I'm good with it. What about you?
I feel like I have the opposite answer. I have always been painfully aware how much I am not like normal people. And so I feel like I've done everything in my power my entire life to try and fit in. And I feel like I've never just like clicked with anything. Like I said earlier, I'm just like super passive through childhood. And I think it just needed to be that like right combination of things where I could click with myself and like realize who I want to be, and then actually find I don't want to say box to fit into, but, you know, find a community and people that I actually might want to be sort of like, if that makes any sense. I have one last question, and this is just something I wanted to add in at the end here because I feel like it might be something that people are wondering when they're listening to this, because when I listen to podcast episodes, I always have things that I'm wondering, and sometimes they don't answer them. So this one's kind of a fun one. Are you doing this because you are a prepper at all?
Short answer, no. But I always struggle with black and white questions, so I'm going to give you a long answer. You know, what's behind that, right, is are you doing this because one day the access to supplies or food or fill in the blank might look different and you want to have a backup plan? That, you know, is maybe less stigmatized if you were to say it that way, but it's kind of the same question. I don't ever want to do anything from, motivated from a place of fear or a place of lack. And maybe it's a fundamental misunderstanding on my part, but my current perspective on that question is, if I were to say yes to that, I would be motivated by fear. I would be motivated by lack. On the other hand, the world's a crazy place. And you never have any certainties of anything. I certainly do feel a level of comfort that if, God forbid, for some reason, if I had to, I could figure it out. I don't want to portray myself as someone who lives perfectly off of what I grow. That's certainly not the case. I still go to the grocery store every week. But if I needed to, again, God forbid, I could manage it. I wouldn't be healthy. I would make a lot of sacrifices, but it could be done. And I think there is something to be said for that. Is there any element of, when you're putting away food, when you're preserving food, when you're thinking about planning your garden for the next year, is there any element of, prepping that's behind that?
This is going to sound silly, but I think for me, it might be the novelty of those old pictures where you see people's really cool, like, canning shelves and their larders and their cold rooms. What are the, like, root cellars. I don't know why I couldn't think of that word. I really love the aesthetic of those, and there is some novelty of that for me. I don't think it's necessarily out of a place of fear whatsoever, but I do think that for me, having shelves full of food in my kitchen reduces my anxiety when I think about the state of the world sometimes. I, like I said earlier, am just so anxious all of the time, and I am overstimulated a lot of the time. And so just like not having to think about that kind of stuff is nice for me. Thinking about 2020 and how we basically just like had to pick up everything that we owned in a week span and like decide to move back to Michigan and live in our friend's spare bedroom for 2 years and not have like any plan or anything we could do about it. And the chaos that was happening during that time definitely like made me more aware of the fact that not only is it really awesome that I can grow my own fresh food and like have all of this stuff that's not in the store, but like the peace of mind that it could bring me if I learned how to do these skills. And even if I couldn't store a ton of stuff, like I don't really think that portion of it is the big deal for me, but knowing that I know how to do that stuff is a big deal to me. I just am a collector of skills, and like I said, I don't think that it's something that I do out of fear. I just think it's a novelty, and I think it's really cool to know that I can do those things.
So these are our motivations, now at the current moment in the current states of our homesteads. As the homestead evolves, do you feel like, and you evolve, do you feel like your motivations are going to evolve?
I do. I don't necessarily know for sure, obviously, what they're going to be in the future. But I like to think that, for example, if we have children in the future, by that point, all of the stuff that we've invested in right now is going to be accessible for them whenever they're able to go outside and eat things. So something I was thinking about earlier this weekend is all of our fruit trees and berry bushes and whatnot will be ready by the time we have kids, probably, and they'll be producing. And I can't think of a better childhood than being able to like walk outside your front door and snack on endless berries or fruits. And I think it's pretty common knowledge that toddlers and little children are obsessed with berries. So I like to think that like I won't ever have to buy berries for my kids because there's just going to be endless amounts of them. So I think that's a motivation for me theoretically in the future. Do you have a future motivation?
I mean, I know that was my question, but that's a hard question to answer. Right? Look into your crystal ball and see the future and know where you're going to be and have insights that you haven't had yet. That's a tough one. But looking at what's really been the main driver for me with the homestead, which is like creating a life that feels good to live, that feels like I can be my full authentic self. Looking into the future of that and saying, okay, when I, 3 years down the road, when the things that are active efforts for me now are reflexive, when I'm even more comfortable in, who I am, when my nervous system is even more regulated, watch out. What would then be, where would I be directing my energy if it's not at all the things I'm directing my energy at now? And I actually talked about this a little bit in one of my recent YouTube videos, but what seems intuitive to me is sharing that. And normally when we talk about sharing things from the homestead, we're talking about sharing produce, or we're talking about, like another concrete way to do that would be like bring people to the homestead just to show them what that looks like. But I'm never going to be someone who just like turns my home into a tourist destination. That sounds like an actual nightmare. And so I think honestly, the motivation would become, sharing with people in a way that is living my own life out loud enough and sharing it enough to, send that outward. And not that people need permission, but sometimes it's nice to feel like you have permission, give people permission to show up exactly as they are, be exactly who they are, however convenient or inconvenient that is for anybody else around you, to do that as well as I can in my own self and in my own life. People have unknowingly done that for me, and it has genuinely changed my life. And so I think paying that forward in any way I can would be a pretty big motivator for me. Whether that's really ultimately related to homesteading or not. But homesteading has been, how I've done that for me. And I could see myself continuing to do it for that reason. And so now we're curious what the motivations for you all might be. Even if you don't have a homestead at the moment, you have a reason that you're interested in it. You have a reason that you're listening to us talk about homesteading for an hour. So tell us down in the comments below why you homestead or why you want to homestead.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of She Said Homestead. We hope you enjoyed our chat. Before we say goodbye, we'd love to hear from you. Send your homesteading stories to us at shesaidhomestead@gmail.com. We can't wait to share them on the air. To stay connected, follow us on Instagram for updates and sneak peeks at what's coming up next.
If you like video podcasts, make sure you subscribe to the She Said Homestead YouTube channel too. We can't thank you enough for being part of the She Said Homestead community. Until next time, happy homesteading.